but I was a yearly attendee at the SIGGRAPH conferences, which for those of you who don't know, this is the special interest group for graphics of the ACM, the American Computing Machinery, I think, or something, or I don't know what it stands for. But in any case, it's in those days, as in the halcyon days and the early days of any of these new concepts, it's way fun to go to these things and see the leaps and bounds of technological evolution. Mm-hmm. And I'm walking around the floor, and there's all these SGI boxes I can never afford, $100,000, $200,000, the other system I can't afford, all this other stuff. There's this one booth by a company called NewTek, where they've got like a couple of Amiga computers up there, and they're showing these spaceships flying around and shooting at each other, and literal quotations from Star Wars and stuff are re-rendered using what essentially was a card inside an Amiga. And I got, totally fascinated, realizing first of all that this was affordable. So the first thing I did was buy one and start mucking around with it to see whether I could first of all learn the software, get it to do what I wanted to do, and then possibly produce something. So yeah, it was a bit before Christmas. I had the song already. It was Change Myself. And the people at the company were very kind of hip and go-go. The engineer who had actually designed the card that went into the Amiga, his name was Brad Carvey. He's a brother of Dana Carvey. So I knew Dana, and there was a connection there, and so developed something, a relationship with the company. Started doing this stuff, experimenting on my kitchen table up in Woodstock, and decided that I was going to make an attempt to try and do this. So I bought 4 more Amigas with the cards in them and started doing this project. At the time, we had no kind of relationship with sound and video. In other words, I had to go through the song that I was going to render and create a storyline with 70 frame accurate shot lengths and things like that, and then wing it from that point on. In other words, render everything and then hope that when I got into final production and synced the sound up to the video, that they would be in sync. There was no way to confirm it before the actual final part of the process, which was more than a month. And by the time we got to the end of the month, the company had come online to help me and provided me with a grand total of 30 Amigas, each one of which had a 200 megabyte drive connected to them, which was a brick about this big. There was no such thing as networking. They all had to be sneaker netted, essentially, together, and that's probably a term that you youngsters have never even heard, but essentially, you take a drive, you fill it up, and then you disconnect it and connect it to another computer and empty it into that computer, and that's how you networked. And so we had 30 drives, about a couple of spares. Every time a drive got filled up, it got dumped down to a data tape storage, and then recycled. And the whole process to render all of this is a 3-minute video, took a month, using 30 machines, And I did not find out until like the last frame was rendered, and we took it into a video post-production studio to lay the sound in, that the sound actually did sync up except for one part in the very beginning. And fortunately for me, they had the technology to actually video stretch part of the video to make it fit in. But otherwise, the rest of it synced up perfectly, and the 3 months of work was not in vain. And when the company, NewTek, who provided all the equipment, saw what I had done, they founded a company with me called Newtopia, and we did experimental video with their equipment for a couple of years.
Dwayne, it's the next clip. If you flip it ahead to the next video, we're looking at the a cappella album, and I skipped past that in the presentation here, but if you get a chance, look at Change Myself online. Many of you I know have seen it, but it's still a work of art, actually, and we know that fella. Yeah. I don't know if we have video anymore, but if we do, I wanted to run a clip from 1991. Maybe we'll just throw the video out and just have a little talk and then take the questions and answers. We talked in 1991 for the first time for television, and I asked you about the next Todd Rundgren project. You just left Warner Brothers. You had recorded Second Wind, which was a big band album live in front of an audience, and you said, I envision the next project will be like being in a fishbowl, something you will inhabit. And I thought, what the heck is he talking about? And a year or so later, you came out with something called No World Order, which was the world's first interactive CD.
Thank you so much.
And again, I think if you don't have it, look it up on the internet. It's worth checking out. But basically, it was the Philips CDI machine. It was later available with the Apple computer.
Yeah, Philips was the entity that actually stepped up to kind of make that happen. I've been doing presentations about the potential for it, but I hadn't actually done any real work in trying to present music in a different way. It was a result of a couple of realizations that I had had. One was that music was being repurposed for things other than what the original producers had in mind. Sometimes not, but often, people would take a record and use it for aerobics or jogging or background music to some other, to cooking, or background music for dinner, or background music for a party. In other words, music was being repurposed for things other than just sitting down and listening to it. And that would seem to be happening more and more. That was a product probably of the Walkman and the idea of the personal musical experience, which didn't exist before the Walkman. Before the Walkman, if you wanted a personal music experience, you had to just go home and put the record you wanted to listen to on and unplug the phone and whatever and listen to the music. Then the Walkman came around and you could devise your musical experience and take it with you. So people suddenly had a soundtrack to their lives, and they were repurposing music for various aspects of their lives, when the artists were thinking, people are just going to put everything else out of their mind and listen to my records, And the other attendant realization that I had was that music was being repurposed in a different sense, in that it looked like new ideas were harder and harder to come by, and so it was just as legitimate to go back and revive an old idea. The biggest hit record that year was Can't Touch This by MC Hammer, which was a Rick James song, except he just wrote different lyrics over it, and it became a bigger hit than the original song was. And there was Frankie Goes to Hollywood, which was not as big a phenomenon here, but I was paying attention to what was going on in England. And every 2 weeks they'd release a new remix of the same song. Relax, there was 20 versions of Relax that came out. And every single one of them went to the top of the charts in England. All right. And I started again in some others. I got into this, actually it's a production entity. Their videos and everything made it look like a band, but they never performed live, they never did anything. They were called a KLF. And they did the same thing, where they did this 3 a.m. Eternal thing, and there were so many different mixes of it, but they all had like a slightly different atmosphere. They were all different lengths, Suddenly music was a plastic thing, it wasn't always the same way every time.
And let me jump in there, because one of the offshoots of this was you went to Time Warner, or maybe you were called in by Time Warner at a certain point, and you had this idea that maybe...
Oh, this is after that. Yeah, this is the third leg, I guess, of the stool was the technology had evolved to the point that you could actually control music in real time. There were music compression technologies, so we could put music on a disc, you could play part of it while you're accessing another part of it, so that you could put chunks of music together in random orders without any sort of apparent interruption in between. But we developed a whole sort of system by which people could describe the kind of music that they wanted, even in very abstract terms, and have the system go out and find the fragments, put them together, and play them for you. Warner Full Service Network was an enterprise that was trying to, was conducting an experiment in Orlando, Florida, in a suburb of Orlando, to find out what the demands for, what the desire was for on-demand television services. They wanted to create a fully interactive TV neighborhood. And they had fiber optic to the curb everywhere, and I don't know what it was from the curb to the house, but they had SGI develop a special box, which was an SGI, it was called an Aqua, I think, or something like that, or an Indigo. And it was a box about this big and about that big and about that thick, and it weighed like 40 pounds. And it sat on top of the TV. They figured, oh, we're gonna get this down the right size eventually, but they had this whole freaking, one of the world's most expensive graphics computers was the box. And they had like applications like design your own pizza, before the pizza gets delivered. But the purpose of the whole thing was to find out what sort of demand there was, for these kinds of services. And they wanted me to design a on-demand music service that would allow people to do what you could do on No World Order. In other words, say, okay, there's the mood I'm in, just pick music that supports that mood, or here's the event that I'm at. It's a dance party and I want dance music, or I want soothing dinner music, or whatever, that you would be able to just, set some criteria and have music piped to you from a server. But obviously to do that, you got to get music on a server, and there were servers, but there was no music on any server anywhere. This was before Napster as well. And we had to go to the major labels and try and get, for experimental purposes only, you understand, the rights to put music on servers so that it could be delivered into people's homes. And I think there were 5 or 6 major labels then, and a lot of the major labels would distribute a lot of labels that could appear to be independent but actually depended on that distribution, and tried to get the rights to put just a handful of your artists, or any of them. Let's put them on the server so we can see whether people actually want to do this, and not a single label would even consider it. They were so worried about bootlegging, for starters. The only thing they were ever focused on is bootlegging, and it's saying this is completely ephemeral. It isn't discs or anything. It's people listening in their homes. And even Warner Brothers. This is the Warner Brothers Full Service Network. Warner Full Service Network. Warner Brothers Records would not give us permission to put anything on a server. So whatever else happened with the rest of the service, they never did get on-demand music services.
And look at us today.
And look at where we're at today. The end result was that they refused to put their stuff on a server, refused to consider putting their stuff on a server, and within like 3 years, Napster is eating their lunch. And they are so slow on picking up on this thing that to this day they haven't caught up. To this day, somebody else besides the record labels has had to take the initiative. In this case, it was probably Apple who convinced them, put your shit on a server, because it's already on servers. It might as well be on a server you have some control over.